Welcome to the Startup Lowdown, where we go beyond the surface to uncover the real stories behind building a successful business. I'm Case Dean, here to bring you an honest look at the ups, downs, and unexpected turns that come with growing something from the ground up. In this podcast, we focus on the human side of business, the tough decisions, the resilience, and the values that drive purpose-driven leaders. Join us as we dive into the personal journeys of inspiring business owners who are committed to making a real impact. Let's get into today's conversation. Today, I'm super happy to have with me Nii Okyne. Is this correct? How have I
You
done?
got the second part right, Nii Okyne, but we're good.
Nii
Nii Okyne, yeah.
Nii Okyne. I'm so sorry. So,
No, no
Nii
problem.
Okyne is a narrative and identity coach, which I'm super interested in find out more about, who helps individuals uncover their true selves through storytelling, drawing on rich cultural heritage and personal histories. With a background in EdTech, SaaS sales, and acting, and a passion for holistic wellness, Nye, yeah, no, Nii,
Keep, keep.
it's
You got
Nii.
it right. It's
Because you
Nii,
told
yeah?
me it's going in
Yeah.
there because you said to me, neat and kind, right?
Yep.
I'm getting
Yeah.
there. But like I
Yeah.
told you, I'm not gonna lie. Normally having an interview at 9:30 in the morning isn't my thing because no matter how much I want to do it, my brain's like, dude, slow it down. What did he say? Let me process it. So
Listen, you're good. You're good. You're good. You're
Nii
good.
Okyne, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, Nii integrates diverse life experiences from Kenya, Ghana, the UK, and beyond into his transformative coaching practice. Now, I'm going to be honest. I had to use my Taylor Mason. That's what I call my AI to try its best to because I couldn't do it. I don't know how we've managed to lose so much skills with automation, but maybe it's a geek in me to kind of reduce you. You did say to me, if it's too long to let you know, because you gave me a lot. But the guy that I spoke to yesterday, I interviewed a guy yesterday, is an author, and I know what it is to be walking around in your body like everybody else, limbs, breathing, whatever. But in actual fact, inside you is a whole world or a universe of different things, different ideas, a lot's going on. And in some situations, a person can have all of these ideas, but none of them come to fruition. And then in other cases, like I'm understanding with you, with the guy I spoke to, and even with myself, these ideas pop off. You bring them to reality. An idea pops off. You bring it to reality. And next, you're doing so many things, like on a mixer table in a recording studio, just bringing it up, bringing it down, bringing it up, bringing it down, and just keeping it moving. So for me, it wasn't really so much that it was too much at all what you sent to me, but definitely for an introduction, it needs to be something that somebody else can bring in, and then we're going to use the rest of the time together to like bring it out. The first thing I want to do though now is thank you so much for being here,
Thank
um,
you.
um, and ask you how you doing. How you doing today?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well. I'm pretty happy to obviously meet with you. Obviously, second time we met, but I'm very well. Really happy to be on your podcast.
So the second time we've met because we met briefly at Joe Penny's event
Shout out
for
to
her
Joe.
company. Yeah, shout out to Joe. She is a powerhouse. She has really um she's gone into the stratosphere, branding wise. She seems to be everywhere.
Yeah.
I'm interested to speak to her again and find out exactly how much of what she had planned to do is what she's actually doing, whether or not it's more than what she planned to do, she was doing, because she seems to be everywhere. I don't know how she's getting the admin done in her business, but I do know she's got a team. So that's normally how it works when you're able to be doing so much at the same time. But yeah, we met at Joe Penny's event, and I've told you directly, and I will say now, you asked just one simple question, but there was something about your stature and the way you asked the question, which I can't remember what the question is, but it just left an impression in me like this guy is someone. Like this guy is just somebody. So when I put out a call for you for looking for guests, and you asked about being on the podcast, got free application, read through it. Um, all warts and all, as I said to you just a few moments ago, I don't want this to be, and it's not. I don't know how I'm going to deal with it if somebody starts doing that. I'll probably just stop the interview, but it's definitely not a place for just promoting somebody's business in the hopes that they get clients or whatever. I'm not interested in that. It's my work and whatever, but this is not it. This is just real conversations about what we can just call normal, everyday human beings doing some amazing stuff. I think I first want to find out what is a narrative and identity coach. What is that? Because it, I understand the words, and I don't like assumption. So tell me, what is that? It's the first time I've heard it.
So I essentially help people through storytelling understand their heritage. Try and go back as far as you can to understand your origins. It just helps to tell a story. I think we all make up a story inside of our heads. And what I do as a narrative coach is I try to take you as close to your truth as possible, to use that more as a repository to source truth. The reason that I do that is because I think, we all think of life differently and we all have different perceptions. But a narrative and transformative coach, I focus on people's heritage, and that speaks to where you come from. So what's been passed on from your father, your father's father, your ancestors. So I help people to explore that, because I think that's absolutely important in finding self, understanding where your roots come from. So as a transformative narrative coach, part of what I do is help you go back into your lineage, into your history, and create a little story for yourself that can help to inform you now. So that's essentially what I help people do.
You've done well to take something that is obviously massive and and deliver a few words to explain it. We're going to go into it a lot more. I would love to know more about that. Something is telling me that I would like to know about it from a personal point of view as well. My
Okay.
parents are Nigerian. I had a conversation with another Nigerian around the same age as my son the other day, who is he's 23 years old. He was born in Nigeria. He
Okay.
left when he was 1 years old. Has been in the UK, and so I said to him, "When was the last time you went back to Nigeria?" And he said to me, "I've never been." I was like, "Damn." I said, "Bro, you're the first Nigerian I've met who's made me feel better because I'm 48 and I've only been to Nigeria once when I was
Wow.
12. I don't speak
Wow.
the language because that
Wow.
wasn't passed down. I have three sons, 29, 21, and 17. And as I was
Okay.
saying to Prince, shout out to Prince, amazing guy, amazing guy. I feel so blessed to have met him. But as I was saying to Prince the other day, it's interesting being a father of children, having this feeling that I don't have, there's something I'm supposed to be passing to them, but I don't have it. I just don't have it to give to them. And then on top of it, I was saying to my wife this morning, the malaise that I've had through my years is this feeling of not belonging anywhere,
Yeah.
of not belonging anywhere. I
Yeah.
can I can assimilate. I can talk with heads of, right? I can go into C-suite and I can talk to heads of. And from the street, I can talk to the street. I can talk to all levels.
Yep.
But that feeling of growing up and just thinking to myself, I don't really fit anywhere. The most I've had that feels like anything of a tree trunk and roots is my own family, where even around Christmas, we have this conversation of creating our own traditions because we don't. Even my wife is from Cameroon. We
Okay.
don't have what we've seen other people have, which is this lineage that you've
Yeah.
talked about. We don't feel
Yeah.
like we have it. But saying all of that, just speaking to you now from something that seems to be a spiritual and scientific point of view, biology or whatever, that lineage is in us. And it sounds like I'm just feeling it, but it sounds like you can help people, maybe like me, tap into that, even though I'm telling you, I've only been to Nigeria once.
Yeah.
Am I making sense? Because I
You-
told you already, it's really
you-
early in the morning, so I don't know.
the neurons in my brain are going ding 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 ding. My brain is the neurons are just firing up. They're just firing up. Listen, it's this is part of what I do. There is this um this disconnect, this emptiness, just because of the lack of continuity of the story being passed on. So what I do is help you connect. Um, it's important to reconcile all of self. To know thyself, you have to accept all parts of yourself. So to know self, you have to understand your whole. How do you understand your whole? You understand your father. There's things that he's passed on to you. Understand your grandfather. So it actually does start taking some time to understand some of the stories that have been passed on. Every family and every lineage passes on a story. But what's important is, I think, when you look into your heritage, you start to understand why you may make certain decisions, why you may be a certain way. It'll inform some things that go on with you now. So it's important to connect that. That's what I do. So I'll explore into your Nigerian roots. Where are you from? What tribe do you belong to? What are some of the things that the tribe practice? Um, what are your interpretations of some of these practices and rituals? But reconciling those things puts you on the path to discovery, because a lot of times you may have a different story or a different perception about things that have gone on in your lineage or in your heritage. So seeking that understanding will help you to obviously see that, okay, maybe this is absolutely wrong. Or maybe you might come to a point where you say, I understand, I understand it, under the circumstances, maybe at that time, this is what people had to do. But when you get the understanding, now you can sit back and not be as judgmental, because you know what I mean. Sometimes there's parts of people's heritage that you struggle to reconcile. Everybody has something bad hidden in there, and it's important to reconcile all of those parts. Otherwise, it's a part of you that's never going to go away. So I think going back and reframing some of the narratives that you may have, maybe let me not use the word reframing, or maybe taking a second look at things within your heritage that you may have not had the capacity to understand at a younger age. We'll revisit that and then start to have conversations about your interpretations of those things, and then look at how some of those things have been carried on. Are they relevant today? Can they inform some of the decisions that you're making today? Are they values that you can pass on to your sons? You spoke about your sons, but then essentially, once you're able to reconcile your history and your lineage, you've basically opened up back up the channel for your sons as well. You talked about being the disconnect. So now it gives you an opportunity to connect. It gives you an opportunity to say, listen, when I was younger, this is how I saw things. But then I revisited at this point and I took it apart. And now I've come away thinking that I need to share this story with you. It may be a bad story, but the story does need to be shared. All bad things are part and parcel of life. There's the yin and the yang. None of us are going to get away are going to get, you can get out of here without doing anything bad. And I think, I don't use the word bad, but there's the lightness and the darkness. There's always, everyone has things that they're not proud of, but you have to take into account the things that you may not be proud of as well. So in a nutshell, that's what I aim to do.
Amazing. How do you do that? I'm just use myself an example with somebody who does not have all of those files and folders of heritage and tribes and so on. Are you doing the research for them, with them? How if it's empty, if the drawers you go into don't have anything to refer to, are you still able to do your work?
You are. You are. I mean, you spoke about. So I mean, already obviously offered me a line. You've not been back to Nigeria in years. Okay. Imagine if you went back now, and imagine if you sent someone in your family a message and said, "Listen, I've been away for all these years. I want to come back, and I want to, I want to understand these things." You start to put the story together there. So every single person that I speak to has a different way to connect. I may suggest to you maybe do a DNA test to
Mm,
understand your ancestry, depending on what part of the world that you come from. And then there's the oral tradition that goes along with it. Don't just speak to your family, speak to other families within your clan or within your tribe or within your group, and try and corroborate some of the stories. Now, part of what I do is informed by a bit of science because I talked about DNA. Scientifically, the scientific paleontology, world of paleontology and anthropology categorically agree that it's very likely that all human beings descend from a group of women who are from East Africa. And they've done this mitochondrial DNA to track pigmentation to say we're all products of that. So I think, in my personal opinion, that fundamental understanding is important because if you look at the relationship that you have with your mother, with your grandmother, there is a respect. And if you think about the context of the fact that we all possibly descend from one person, how did we all become what we are now? How did we all get to a point where we can look at each other and say to each other that, you know what I mean? I don't like this person. I don't like this about this person. But I think, especially for people of color, in order to reconcile your heritage, I think if I can be a little blunt, sometimes when I do speak with people, which is fine, a lot of people, when trying to find self, may stop at um, a religion. They might say, "Listen, listen, this is I belong to this faith, and I know God exists this way," which is fine. What I do implore people to do is to look beyond and look further back because it's important to take into context how long we've been on this earth. So religion as we know it, the Abrahamic ones, I don't know for a fact, but maybe 3,000 years, 3,500 years. If you want to look at the science and you think to yourself that, look, bones have been discovered in Africa that date hundreds of thousands of years. There have been migrations. So there's a story between the 300,000 years and then the 3,000 years where these religions started. In my humble opinion, one cannot really truly find their truth if you discount the majority of the existence of humanity. I struggle to ignore that. So part of what I do is reconcile that. You want to reconcile these things, as in, when you look at science, the Rift Valley area is essentially an area where there are tectonic plates that sit underneath the earth surface. Underneath these plates, so this molten lava, and when the earth shifts and the ground comes apart, it forces the molten lava out. The Rift Valley is very significant because most scientists would agree that there isn't anywhere else in the world that you find a more an area where you find such a diversification of species. So when you look at the area scientifically, there's a lava that comes from the volcano. There's the thermal energy, but that starts to tell the story when the first group of people came around there. There are certain things that you can connect. For example, today Some of the great, one of the largest migrations of animals happens in the Serengeti, where the animals cross looking for a water source, all in that area. But that starts to tell a story of how our ancestors started to try to understand the earth that sustained them and the animals around them. They observed animal migration patterns and how animals sourced water. They followed animal patterns. They sat up and looked at the position of Sirius, and they realized that, listen, every time the star came up, this is how things turned out. They built a calendar off of that. They came up with building pyramids, geometry. Um, Greek philosophers like Pythagoras and Aristotle that came to the land of these our ancestors. A lot of that story is discounted when you choose to look at your life from that 3,000 year scope. So how do you really empower yourself? What story do you really want to tell? Do you want to tell the story from 3,000 years old, or you want to tell the full story? So putting that story together is important. I'm fortunate, very fortunate, because I come from Ghana in West Africa. In case it's interesting my life because I've lived in Ghana, I've lived in India, I've lived in Kenya, I've lived in the UK, and I've lived in the US. At a young age, I was this African kid. I moved to Kenya, I think, in the early '80s, and I lived in a African country, but I went to a predominantly white prep school called the Banda School in Kenya. So I lived in a black country, but I went to a school where I was a minority. There were no
That's
black
interesting.
teachers.
That's so crazy.
So
That's crazy.
I had no black teachers. All of my teachers were white English people. And I studied Latin. I studied the Anglos, the Saxons, the Jutes, the Vikings. So by the time I was 7, 8, I knew more about the history of the world than of myself.
Right.
But my story kind of, I mean, yes, there's many parts of my story, but when your thinking is shaped like that, you get to a point where I got to a point where I wanted to explore further. So I come from the Ga tribe, and this is the story that I tell myself, and it's based on traditions that have been passed down. Some of these things have been corroborated by science, some haven't. Let me see if I can give you the story. So the Ga tribe, oral tradition says we originate from a place called Goshen in the Fertile Crescent of Egypt. Now, our elders tell us that we followed the Nile, left Egypt, led by a priest at the time. And as we were looking for new lands to settle on, some groups splintered off. Some groups splintered off into Nubia. Some groups splintered off into your country, Nigeria, into a place called Ile-Ife, before my tribe came to settle in Ghana. But there's some interesting things within the language that if I didn't understand my language, I may not understand. So Nubia, the word Nubia in my language means child of the water. Nubi. Now, when you go to Nubia, they're mostly fisher folk and they live by the Nile. My tribe say we also follow the Nile. When you go to Ghana today, the Ga tribe are the fisher folk of Ghana. They're one of the fisher groups. And they only live by a water body. They don't live in the hinterland. The Gans only occupy the coast. Every year we have a festival called the Homawa Festival that is started by the high priest or a representation of the high priest that led us from Egypt, wears sackcloth till to this day and is barefoot. The progenitor of my tribe is called Nii Kushi. So our story says, okay, we came from Egypt. Some of us settled in Nubia. And then we look at where we settle today as a people, and we live by a water body. The word Nubia translates into child of the water. You see Nubians who live by water. The person that led us, our progenitor, is called Nii Kushi. The word Kush, Kushi, references that same area So there's that, and there's other things that inform my story. So that for me it gives me a larger scope. It gives me a larger scope. So this is what I try to help people do to open up the scope, because I'm not asking you to discount the 3,000 years. It's relevant. It's taken place. This is the world that we live in today. But just consider everything else to go along with it and then make the bigger informed decision.
Absolutely amazing. Look, okay. So for everybody I speak to, I choose to do recon. So I go and I dig around and check out this, and I'm always looking for a narrative that I'm gonna follow. For you, and everything you just told me just now, I know that you started off in sales. And if I just go by what's on LinkedIn, this is 2003. And there's a period of sales between just sales job, sales executive. I think you're working within cars. Um, and then it gently kind of goes into tech, SaaS. There's business development in there, still sales. And now I'm looking up and down this timeline and trying to see this everything you've told me about the coaching part. I had no, I didn't, I know nothing of this until you've explained this. Absolutely amazing. But I'm looking at this timeline trying to find, okay, when does this part kick off? And it's always interesting because I find when I'm auditing websites for redesigning them and then speaking to the owner, the website never reflects the owner ever. The owner's like amazing. I'm like, why is your website like this? It doesn't really. Same thing with a LinkedIn profile. It's got these little bits in it that tell you things, but it doesn't really reflect it. And even now, listening to you, my first thought is this guy's always been like this. He's always been like this. But if I take you back to this period of sales, and then we look at a gap, and at the end of that gap is what you've just talked to me about now as a coach. Can you help me understand how you traverse that gap?
Yeah.
What was happening or what
What was
happened?
what happened is I think is pretty similar to a lot of people who feel, you're raised in a family where you got to go to college, you got to tick all of these boxes, you got to create yourself a career that is not going to ruffle feathers, especially when you're living in the West. You know, some of the things I discuss as a narrative coach can be triggering to some. So um, I've always had these conversations with people around me. My family have known I've been on this trajectory. I've just never really found a way to help it to sustain me. It sustained me spiritually, mentally. It sustained me and helped me to tell my story. But I have a set of 16-year-old twins who
Mhm.
eat, go to school, and like nice things like their parents do. So I never found a way to use this skill to sustain myself till now. So sales has always been the default. I started out in sales because I was naturally good at it. Um, I literally used to work in a store in the U.S. in a town called Woodbridge. I used to work in a Best Buy. I don't know if you remember the blue and yellow
Yeah,
Best
yeah,
Buy.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I think one of my first jobs was in the Best Buy. I used to work in the computer department, and I met a bunch of two Ukrainian gentlemen who came in to buy some computers once, and they came in and I sold them everything I could sell them. You know what I mean? I sold them accessories. Back then it was like printer cables. I said, "Oh, get the gold cables, get the this." I mean, I sold them everything that I could sell them, and that was great. But then a few days later, I'm at work, and then I hear a call from customer service. Back then, if you had a return, they would call the manager of the department, which I was. So they called on the thing that Nii, you have a return. So I go up to customer service and I meet these same Russian guys that I sold all of these things to. And the guy's name is David. And I'm like, Dave, what's going on? Why are you returning all of this stuff? And he just looked at me and he's like, dude, I don't really need all of these things. So I was like, so what, you're going to return it? And he's like, no, I came back to hire you. I want you to come work for me right now. I sell cars down the road. I need you to stop your job and come work for me. I'm like, dude, I'm not gonna come work for you. I don't want you to return this stuff. You know what I'm saying? What you're doing right here is hurting me. You know what I'm saying? Whatever you do, I mean, you can't be returning stuff and ask me to come work for you. So this guy literally implores me to come work for him, and I don't till I have an issue at my job one day. And I remember I used to live in a town called Jersey City. So I get off work at Woodbridge. I'm driving down Route 9. His car dealership just used to be on the side of the highway. So as I'm driving home, I say to myself, you know what, let me just stop at this guy. So I stop and pull into the car dealership. I get there, he's not there. I meet somebody else at the car dealership. I'm like, hey, I'm looking for Dave. They're like, Dave's not here. He's away in Russia, but I can call him. So the guy calls Dave up. And I'm like, Dave, how you doing? And he's like, Nee. And he's like, are you coming to work for me? I'm like, I don't know. And he's like, listen, I'm in Russia. I really want you to come work for me. Let me speak to Andre. So he passed the phone to Andre, speaks to Andre, and then Andre hands the phone back to me. He's like, I'm going to give you $1,000 right now. Go to my accountant. He's going to give you a check for $1,000. I'm giving you that to come work for me. I'll be back in 2 weeks. Come sit down and work for me. And I started out selling cars. That's how I got into sales. I started working for some gentleman from Ukraine, and it was a tough selling cars in the US is not for the faint-hearted. You know what I mean? I did things I wasn't comfortable with. I you know what I mean? When you sell cars, when people come in, they're not people. We're predators, car salesmen. Especially if you're a woman and you walk through the door. I'm thinking to myself, that's my vacation to Ghana this year. This woman. I will sell you every single upgrade on the car. Back then, I used to do some bits of finance, so maybe a bank can say, give the dealership a 3% interest rate. Mrs. Case will walk in, I'll charge her eight. I think back then you could increase the interest by about 4 or 5 points. I would overcharge you on the interest. I would overcharge you on your insurance. I would overcharge you on every single thing. And that's how my sales career started. I used to make a lot of money, but I never really felt good about myself.
Right.
I never really felt good about myself. And even now, I've had some issues around business development where it's not usually my nature to be so aggressive and to chase people up. You've
Right.
met me, we've had conversations. I try to get my point across. I feel like I'm articulate enough and I can get my point across. But when I get my point across, I kind of let go. I don't keep beating the bush. I'm not that person. So it compromises some of the sales. So the long answer to your question is I started out in sales as a default because somebody recognized that, listen, this guy could be good at it. I ended up being good at it. I ended up making money doing it, but I never satisfied. It just, I just never felt satisfied until I started trying to reconcile and try to bring this part out. How can um, what story is there for me to tell? How can I use this story to impact people? How can I motivate, educate people? Because this is what my passion is. I'm such a sucker for history, for reading, for science. And so in July, I left my job, and I
July
was
of when? July of when?
just July of this year.
Okay.
I no longer worked at my job. Didn't I mean ended well, but
Were you're doing business development? What were
I
you
was
doing
doing
this?
I was doing business development. So I was working for a company called Expert HR, which changed to Brightmind, and I was on a SaaS sales team. I've sold software for years, so I used to sell gender pay gap software. and salary software when you want to check salary. So basically, I used to sell that, but I've always sold software into HR. I started out selling learning management systems, and then I ended up going to Ghana and setting up my own learning management system. But my most recent job, I was selling SaaS. I've been selling SaaS software for many years, maybe 15, 16 years now.
Amazing. And then, and I'm looking for the timeline, remembering you worked at Coach Hub. Because for me, when I was going through, I saw something underneath, which was the HR bit. So now
Yeah,
we're getting closer, but still not there, but we're getting closer to helping people. Because what you've explained from the sales point of view is exploitation of people, right? Exploitation of their situation. Sales. I hate sales.
sure.
I've always looked at sales. I remember when I first understood what OTE is. I was young. I started my career I started off as a barber when I was 16 or 17. By
Okay.
19, I had my first son, and then
Mm,
everything changed, right? But
okay.
when now looking for the money,
Yeah.
forget the dreams. We're
Yeah.
looking for the money, and I saw the sales jobs, and the sales jobs always had OTE.
Yeah.
And I didn't see the OTE first. What I saw first was the 100,000. I'm like,
Yeah.
there's something I can do for 100,000.
Yeah.
And then I was like, OTE on top of earnings.
Yeah.
And then bit by bit, I learned that you can make 100,000. It's been done, but here's your 10,000,
Yeah.
not for the month, for the year.
Yeah.
And if you want to get that 100,000 and you want to keep this little peanut dust 10,000, you need to sell.
Yeah.
What I found out throughout the whole of my career, which most people tell around and say to me, that's not true. That's why I liked within your um, bio that you sent me, you had the words consultative selling,
Yeah.
which is where I am.
Yeah.
I wholeheartedly believe in it's what I teach to the people I work with.
Yeah.
Consultative selling. I like the term sales advisor. You know, I like these. I used to work for Louis Vuitton. I trained a whole team working within sales online.
Okay.
And what I used to tell them is, even though the bosses were like, we need to make these sales, I told the team, listen, your job is to help somebody who's trying to get somewhere get there by just answering questions. Your job is not to push them there. Because with the 30-day statutory rights and everything else, you're
Yeah.
just going to get a return anyway. Some of these people are going to call up, and at the time, this was before Visa 3D Secure, they're going to call up and say, I've got a charge here for $6,000. I didn't buy anything for Louis Vuitton. What the hell's going on? Now, the bosses have told you lot to just make money, sell these bags, but that person needs your help, and it's not your fault. How are we going to help them? What are we going to do? So I've always been in a bit of a situation where the world around me is telling me sell, be good at selling. You're going to make loads of money, be able to eat, be able to feed your family. But every single test I took for becoming a salesperson was like, no, go customer service,
Yeah. It's
go
it's
to
it's
customer service.
it's
You're
got.
not that person. You're not that guy. And the thing is in life, I'm not a shrinking violet. Do you understand what I'm saying, Shu? But the idea, I used to work for O2, and I remember doing telesales
Yeah.
and selling phone contracts, and I had a sale. So they had these boards, right? Where they would say how many sales people have got, and
Yeah.
you're getting Nintendo and all this kind of shit. And at that time, I hated that environment. I hated it. I'm like, can nobody see that we're getting puppeteered out
Yeah.
here?
Yeah.
Can nobody see that? In actual fact, why did you come with that little dagger? I thought me and you had lunch yesterday. Like, what is going on? Right? This whole kind of cutthroat thing was going on, and I couldn't stand it.
Yeah.
So I remember thinking I need to keep this job. And I remember raising my hand at the time because there was this whole closing thing that was going on and blah blah blah. And I was like, I've got one, or whatever it was, you know. So the guy comes over and he goes, "What do you got?" And I goes, "I've got this dude. He's a lawyer. He's making this amount of money. He's doing this." The guy said to me, "Put on the phone." What do you mean put it on the phone? So just put it on the phone. Put it on the phone. Went about my work. Couldn't understand anything. What is going on? Blah blah blah. Fuck this guy. Next thing, I had the guy come over to me because they'll listen to your calls.
Yeah.
And I had spoken to a lady who I'd spoken to, got to a certain point within the whole spiel and the contract, and said to myself, nah, she ain't the one. It's not going to work out. Thank you, ma'am. Put the phone down. This guy came, as soon as the phone was going down, this guy was storming over to me and started berating me. I'm like, what's your problem, man? He said to me, why didn't you sign her? I said, she's a single mum, dude, with no job. And she just told me she's about to have her second baby and they're like 2 years apart or some shit. Like, what? She ain't got no money. He said, that's exactly who we need because we're going to trap them into the credit agreement. And it all just flew out of his mouth, like bit by bit. And I was just like, what? And I was young. So I didn't know any of this stuff. I was like, what the hell? And then you start to learn about credit traps and all that kind of stuff.
Mm.
And all of that at the time, for me, when it comes down to I'm a young father, I've got to, the friction. So you just said something, any things I did what I got to do. I actually never got that part of me that actually went through it and said, I've got to do this. I actually, I can't even say moral compass. I was actually just really adverse to that way of being. Interestingly, I teach sales now, but I, right? But I teach it from the point of view of sales comes after marketing. Marketing is about education, and sales is just about helping the person come to the best decision for them, not for your business, for them.
It's
And
a
if
lot
we've
of
done everything correct prior to the marketing and all of the planning and strategy, the best thing for them is working with you. It's simple selling,
yeah.
not hard gimmicky selling. Gimmicky selling. It makes sense?
Makes a lot of sense. Makes a lot of sense. It's difficult. I don't want to broad stroke all salespeople, but yes, there are some sales environments that don't bring the best out of you. I can speak to myself. There's been a lot of times where I've done things where I'm not comfortable with, but I mean, I look pretty young, but I'm almost 50. You know what I mean? I've been around the block, so I got some miles on me. But I guess maybe when you get older, it becomes harder to reconcile with those things. The voice just becomes louder. You know what I mean? You can't do this. You have a son that looks up to you. You know what I mean? You have a wife. You have kids. You become more aware of the things that you align with. So I think that awakening kind of started. You spoke to Coach Hub, and you spoke to what happened before Coach Hub. What happened before Coach Hub was significant because I moved to the UK in 2008,
Mm, okay.
and then I was here till 2012. In 2008, I had my kids, a set of twins, born here in Reading. But I said to myself that I was going to make sure that I raised my kids in Ghana. I wanted to, well, first off, I wanted to spend more time with my dad, and I was here, and I wanted my kids to really have a great relationship with my father too. So I left the UK and moved my family to Ghana for 8 years. And I think that's probably where the story started really coming together because I started to work for myself. I set up Skills Plus, which was a learning management system. I was selling HR services and training, sales training, leadership development training. And that was fulfilling because on so many occasions I'd be out with my kids and people would walk up to me and be like, "Oh, Mr. Nee, man, I loved your session, Mr. Nee." And I would get people, it's funny. So listen, I was doing this in Ghana, you know what I mean? And I spent a lot of time here. So people coming up to me and they're like, yo, Mr. Nii, oh, and you're Ghanaian, and what you wear dreads? How do you navigate like that? And you're like, oh, you inspire me. But that started to mean more than the money. When people could tell me that, listen, I inspired them, and when my kids were seeing that. So I to move my family to Ghana for a year. I set up Skills Plus, and then my wife at the time also set up. I mean, I'm not making this up, but we used to like sausages, and when we moved to Ghana, we couldn't get really good quality sausages. We were always buying these Frankfurter sausages, and my wife said to me, she's like, no, no, we can't eat this. So she goes on Google one day, and she Googles how to make a sausage. A week later, she's in the kitchen trying to do stuff, buy sausage. Before I know it, she orders some sausage casings. She buys a sausage machine, and she's like, I'm gonna start making sausages. We started a sausage business that, I mean, we literally had a factory making homemade sausages that we sold to pot. That's how I survived in Ghana. I was doing HR, and we sold sausage to almost exclusively the diplomatic community. I used to sell sausage to the U.S. Embassy, the Danish Embassy. But that idea, and I love the fact that my children could wake up and see both their parents working for themselves. You know what I mean? We hired staff. We had people that came to work for us. But that was the vision that I wanted to give my children. So Ghana helped me to do that. So while I'm there, you know what I mean, I'm starting to, build my business, spending time in my country. I'm taking my kids to, all of these sites to just help inform them as well. But that was significant. But so when I was moving back to the UK, I reached out to most of my contacts, and I've been in touch. You know what I mean? I used to visit the UK. We'd come on vacation, whatever. And some of my really great friends said to me, listen, Nee, you've been away for about 8 years. Listen, when you come back, let's look at kind of getting back into the corporate world to just kind of get back to speed with how things have moved on. You know what I mean? Things have moved on significantly from where you left. So when I first came, I had a really good friend, Alison Sinclair, that mentored me. She helped me set up my LinkedIn profile. She talked to me about having a social footprint. You know what I mean? Did all of that, and I got ready to go work into corporate, which is when I went into Coach Hub. Coach Hub, I went into because that spoke to this coaching thing that I wanted to do. You know what I mean? I come from Ghana. I'm thinking to myself, this is a great company. So that's why I chose to go work at Coach Hub. So I start to learn coaching. Obviously, I'm selling at this point, but I've already expressed the business that I really want to coach. You know what I mean? But I'm selling, selling, selling. But then um, a situation that maybe I perceived differently, but whatever happened, I left. I left Coach Hub, and then I moved to Bright Mind. But coming off of Skillsoft, moving my family to Ghana, I had this. To be fair, it wasn't like an epiphany or any specific moment, but when I came back, I knew I didn't really want to go
Hmm.
and have to do this type of selling. I'm still happy to sell, and as a matter of fact, I have applied to some jobs, but I'm picky. I'm not going to go and work for anybody right now. You know what I mean? I'm picky, but where I go work, the values have to really align. A lot of people talk the
Right.
values. I've worked with a lot of organizations that talk the
Right.
values, but these values are not articulated. As an individual, I have personal values. When I don't stand on those personal values, I hate myself. I
For
feel
sure.
horrible. I'm
For sure.
anxious. So when I look at that on the macro level from an organization that says these are our values that don't align, it almost makes me feel the same way. So
Hmm.
now I almost feel like, look, I, 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 you want to pick me, but I'm going to pick you too. I'm not just going to come work for you just because you're
For sure.
offering this OTE, because my peace of mind and what I'm aiming to do, I'm not going to allow my values to be compromised.
So when now we get back to the narrative and identity coach, you your story about Dave, I understand exactly what you mean by having to sacrifice parts of who you were becoming or who you were. to get certain things done. I call it doing shit for money. It's
Yeah,
what happens, right? I talk all the time about ideal clients. I love working with people to find out who are you supposed to be working with.
yeah.
But I always tell them that while we're doing this, you're going to be doing some shit for money.
Of course, of
But
course.
always keep your eye on what you know. If
On
you
the
if you
ball.
could only right, if you could only have a business filled with these people every morning you woke up, and this is who you worked with, who would they be? Keep your eye on that, even though you're going to work with less than savory people, right? So I'm listening to your story, and I understand that there's always been this thread of I was reminded of what I used to tell people sometimes back in the day. I read less than I did before. I now grab information. I used to be really inside. I'd People say to me, "How are you able to read three books at once?" And I say to him, "How are you able to watch three series at once?"
Yeah,
For, for me, it's the
I've
same
seen that.
thing,
Yeah.
right? It's exactly the same thing.
Mm.
But what I used to tell people when I was younger, and I used to go through a lot of these very spiritual kind of experiences. So I would find books. I'd just be on my route and I'd find books. Nowadays, when you see people kind of put books by the side of the road because their thing is, we don't want to go and sell it. We're not selling it. They're just here. If you want it, take it.
Yeah,
Tesco's
yeah.
has the same kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
If you give them a book, you can take a
You can
book.
take one
But
back.
it wasn't so much that. And at one point, Emma Watson, who played Hermione in Harry Potter, she started off this movement of leaving books in places and started a movement of people leaving books for other people. They'll read it, then they'll go and leave it somewhere else for people, right? So I'd find books. I remember I found a book of poetry by Keats. I remember one day, considering what I've told you about my heritage, I came across a very, very old book. I don't know if it's here, it might be in the garage, a book of Yoruba language. My dad is from Yoruba, my mum is Igbo. And I found this Yoruba book, and it was just like, what? These kind of things. And I told people at the time, I've realized that in a lot of respects, I'm a vessel. So I was telling them, I know I've read books where the information isn't for me.
They made the
Like,
information work for you though.
right, okay, but this is what I was telling people.
Yeah.
I've read books where I know the information isn't for me. And then a year later, I'll be having a conversation with somebody about something, and I can hear my mouth saying things from the book
Yeah.
before my brain has a chance to actually, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
And for that person, it unlocks something for them,
Yeah.
right? That's what I'm getting at. So definitely, I totally get what you're saying, that there is definitely for me, but I had this experience of absorbing things.
Yeah.
Some of it's for me, but consciously knowing that I don't know when, but I'm holding something for somebody at some point in the future. I didn't do it purposely in the sense of let me just read these books, because I just became conscious of it. I'm reminded of this from listening to you, because when you talked about being somebody who's interested in history, I am too. Anthropology, ep- etymology, the link of words,
Etymology.
right? Of the origin of words,
Yeah.
especially with my wife being French.
Okay.
Um, the link between French and English, the different words, their meaning. If for us, we will buy a souvenir in France, souvenir means memory. All of that fascinates the hell out of me, right? But when I listen to you and your interest, and then what you've told me about building your business in Ghana, then people come up to you and saying that they've been inspired you and so on and so forth. I understand that there's some similarities in the sense that you've got a bunch of knowledge and there's no point keeping it to yourself. I can't remember who I heard the other day turn around and said, it was Jazzy Jeff who was talking about something, saying, you need to before you die, you need to empty yourself of all your knowledge and give it to the people around you.
mm,
So I'm listening to you, and I'm hearing you full of all of this knowledge, and it keeps getting topped up, and it helps in your conversations, it helps in your coaching. I can totally see that. But then I listen to your story and wonder, how did you land on narrative and identity coach? Before I let you answer that, because when I was listening to you talk about growing up, I'm silly, and I told you I'm okay now. I'm waking up, but I'm a bit silly. So I was listening to you talk about being a kid, and I need to do a safe job or whatever. And I'm hearing you as a kid talking, and your parents, whoever, hear anything, and ask you, "What do you want to be a priest? What is your thing? Do you what do you want to be an orator? You do you big head boy. What is it that you you just want to be talking and telling? You want to give me lesson?" So
mm,
I understand that you've gone through life and you've learned and you've understood people. I love understanding people, their potential, helping them in different ways. Some people see it, some people don't. Those that really do need that help, and you come across them and you can help them, and they're like, "Oh, thank you." And you're like, "No, that was all you.
yeah,
That was all you. I'm happy to have contributed
yeah,
to helping you see something. I just literally all I did was move you from here to here
yeah,
and told you just turn your head like that. You see it now?" I
yeah,
said, "That's your reflection. That's your reflection. It was always there in the mirror. It was a small thing I did,
yeah,
right?" But when I listened to you and realized you could have been what we would call a life coach, you could have been a motivational speaker. Maybe these things are already on your horizon. I don't know. But narrative and identity coach is so specific. How do you decide to take all of that and put it into that? Considering you're a businessman in the true African sense of the word, and also within your experience in your career, you could have taken what you've learned over the years and form it into anything you wanted. Sausages, I'm hearing. I'm hearing everything you've told me. You have the power to form it into anything you want. And you have the power to create an illusion of it being what it is, even if it's not yet that. You have that power. But you've decided to do narrative identity coach. Why? Why that?
Okay, so that's a really good question. And it's funny, I'm someone who I'm not necessarily interested in answers. The questions that people ask really inform me of what they're thinking. So why this? I've been practicing mindfulness meditation for many years. You talked about books that you've read. I've consumed a tremendous amount of literature myself. Similar to yourself, I don't read as much. But when I remember when I was 8 years old, my father used to have a collection of books written by Kwame Nkrumah. Not sure if you know who he is, but Kwame Nkrumah
No.
was the first president of Ghana.
Okay.
And I remember I took keys to his book cabinet and took the book and read the book at 8. And I remember asking my dad, I remember I said to dad, "Dad, but why was Nkrumah a communist?" And my dad's looking at me like, wait, what, do you know what that word means? You know what I mean? So he's like, but I've read a lot of books. I've studied a lot of books. For me, I think that stories that we tell ourselves can be very dangerous because it depends on what's informing your story. Okay. We've latched on to stories that don't inform unity or continuity or don't inform sustenance. Okay. People tell each other stories to say, okay, yeah, my story is this, but it's not a cohesive story, but we're all part of a human race.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And when you really think about it, we have to find a way to survive, basically, I think, as human beings. How do we do that? We need to find a way for the earth to sustain us. Okay. The way that we live now is not sustainable. We're overpopulated on the earth and we're ridding the earth of a lot of resources. So the story that you tell yourself must inform you in a way to think to yourself that I need to find a way for us all to survive.
Okay.
That's that. If we don't figure out a way
Okay.
to tell ourselves the right story, then the story needs to be, because you can create any story.
Hmm.
Now you can just create any story, but if we don't have a fundamental base and our stories don't align and we don't understand that, we need to find a way for this earth that we're on to sustain us. If our stories aren't telling us that, or if whatever story is leading us to not contribute to making the earth a sustainable place, then it's not really working to me. And I think that's why this narrative coach, I meet so many people who tell me, this is my story, this is my story. And sometimes I think to myself, I wish I could expand that a little bit. Because if your story is exclusive to just you, just one group, just this, if your story is exclusive, then it doesn't tie into the whole human thing. I talk about archaeology, I talk about mitochondrial DNA, because what I'm trying to say is that this whole theory of race does not really exist. We're not a race of people, we're human beings. And we all have the same responsibility of human beings. You know what I mean? Don't look at the color. We have to find a way for the earth to sustain us. So if our stories aren't informing us to work together, the first story, and the reason why I go back so far is because our ancestors understood this. They knew that the earth had to sustain them, so they didn't take too much from it. They knew that the animals also were part of the ecosystem, so they didn't kill too many of them. The story that we tell ourselves are going to inform how we treat ourselves and we ultimately treat the earth. That's why.
But when you now, so you talked about finishing, creating your job and going full into coaching. Have you been coaching people while working?
I've always coached people, and
Right. That's what I was gonna get to.
I've always coached people, and again, um, I think when I moved to Ghana and started Skillsoft, because I was training people in sales, some of these insights from all of my reading would come across into
Most definitely.
my sessions. Whatever session I was delivering had elements of all of these experiences that I shared. So many
And
people,
this was something you're doing with people that's actually helping ignite their potential, because what you're doing, if you're creating a business and then you're getting staff, it's cool. You're giving them a job. Here's how to do your job. Bam. End of. I can see it, but I need this to be on the recording, so we're going to go through it. I can see how you connect the individual to the wider society and then to the planet. I can totally see it. But when I bring it down to an individual level, you were not obliged to train and then coach people for them to be more than they presented themselves as, or even to be intrigued to ask themselves, because this is your whole thing about expanding the narrative backwards, maybe forwards, maybe around you, but settling for being a certain form that's been imposed upon you, or looking to someone to give you whatever your identity is supposed to be. In actual fact, it seems like you've been having conversations from your job and continuously through your coaching career under the side, as a vertebrae through, where helping somebody, I'm going to use the words because the only words that come to mind, kind of unlock their potential and unlock their curiosity, and then unlock, which is the word I don't think we've used, which does lead into the wider society, purpose. Because the thing for me, I've always told people, "Oh, great working with you, Case." I'm like, you know what? I talk to you about, again, ideal clients and finding your ideal client, because I can't work with anybody. And I tell people, I take them through in the very beginning of the work we do together. I take them through a workshop which is called Business Vision. It's not business plan, business vision. And I want you to work on the ultimate vision of what your business could be. If there was no constraints with money, nothing could stop you. What would you do with your business? You all your bills are paid for. You've got all your savings. What would you do with your business? And I'm using this workshop, and it's always been something I've done over 10 years. I want to dig so far into that person to see and uncover a purpose that can come to the forefront that helps them, helps others, and helps the wider community around us. And if I dig and I dig and I dig and I dig, and it's not always in people and I don't find it, I won't work with this person. I won't try and find it with them or try and teach them. But the people where it just seems to be almost like under rubble,
Yeah.
their life is right.
Mm.
And it's just like I can see a glimmer of light.
Yeah.
There it is. Bam. And we bring it up. And I always tell them when you do your business vision and I read it, do you know my test for knowing if you've done it correctly is it's not your prose, it's whether or not I get goosebumps.
Mm.
Once if I read it and I get goosebumps,
Then you know.
let's go,
You know.
let's work
That
together.
makes a lot of sense.
And I've had people do that, I kid you not, and come back to me and tell me I cried going through that process. I had someone
Mm.
say to me, Case, um, I don't know how to explain you. Because I ask people all the time, through my career, because I'm trying to do it for my marketing, so I'm trying to use their words. How would you explain me to other people? Case, it's impossible. You're a website designer, you do graphic design, you can code, you're a coach, you do operations, you do this. And the worst thing is, everything I do with you feels like therapy. It feels like therapy. I remember I met a lady, Sadia Baba. I'm going to interview her soon. I met this lady at a networking event. And I was talking to her, and for about 20 minutes, I just got through the door to this networking event, and she started talking to me. And I literally couldn't work out if I was at the front door of this event because there was no door, or if I was already in the event because she
Yeah.
just came up to me and started talking to me. Next, I couldn't work out if she was one of the attendees like me or if it was her event.
Okay.
Like, and I know she takes people to Pakistan to help with the education of Pakistan, to change the narrative around Pakistan. She does home fragrances. She told me so much. And my brain was saying, you've got the business cards, man. When is she going to ask you about you?
Yeah.
But that part of me was such a small voice
Mm.
because I am really interested in what she's telling me.
Yeah.
So about 20 minutes, she's just telling me this, telling me this, telling me this. And at one point, she stopped and she said to me, "You're a really good listener, you know." I was thinking, you know what? Yes, I am. I totally get what you're saying. But you do realize that there could be somebody else here who just nodded away, and it's not to do with listening. They just didn't say anything. But she said to me, "You're a really good listener." And the next thing she said to me is, "You know what? You should be a coach."
Yeah.
But the thing is, I already do coaching. I've been doing it for, like you've said, all my life. I tell people like this: if I wasn't a coach, I'd be a teacher. If I wasn't a teacher, I'd be a priest, the good
Exactly.
kind. Right?
My
If
dad
I
used to
wasn't a
say that to me.
priest, I'd be a speaker. If I
Yep.
wasn't a speaker, I'd be a world-changing president. Right?
Absolutely.
It's always going to be the same
Yeah.
type of person.
Yeah.
Does this make sense
Makes
for
sense.
you?
Makes sense. I mean, I'm in the same boat. It's a struggle to call myself a narrative coach, but it doesn't mean that I'm not a motivational speaker because I do that. You know what I mean? There's a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of moving parts here. I think this speaks to more of how I impact people. You know, I can motivate you. That's just a couple minutes. You know what I mean? You can be motivated for a day, 2 days. You know what I mean? I met this guy. Made an impression on me. You know, I, I think discipline is sustained. Okay, so your story and how you frame your mind and how you inform yourself is important. You know what I mean? So that's why that's what I speak to, because people can tell themselves all types of stories. Yes, we all have different stories. Yes, we've all been through different experiences, but there is a common thread within all of humanity, and this allows me to speak to that. That's
And
the
what would you say you're giving them the power to do, if I could put it that way?
um so
Or become or
okay, so giving you the power to do so. Long answer. So I started indigenous intelligence as a result of just serving friends and family, talking about your nemesis, Black History Month. You know what I mean? I'd ask people in the West that, what do you think about Black History Month? As a matter of fact, during Black History Month, I did a presentation where when I started, I asked in the chat, what do you think of Black history? And when you grow up in the West, a lot of people and a lot of the answers that I got were slavery, colonialism, struggle, and I got one jollof, one, you know what I mean? But when I saw that personally, as a person of color, yes, there is some struggle, but because I'm privy to all that came before the struggle, I don't think that that's the narrative. I think
right,
when we talk Black history, yeah, apart from the fact that it's relegated to 1 month, it doesn't really tell the true story. So for me, I started Indigenous Intelligence and I market it as a yearly program with quarterly contacts because the history that people designate or want to call African history, I don't think is an appropriate title. The history of Africa is our history. When you label it as African history, people disconnect from it. So the message of Indigenous Intelligence it's not African history. It is our history. It's relevant all throughout the year. So I started Indigenous Intelligence, which is part of why we came here, as a platform to go out to STEM aligned schools, to go out and talk to corporates and say, listen, in order for you to fix these inconsistencies, we have to find a common ground. We have to inform ourselves that, listen, we are all one, because that starts to break up the racial divides. But then you ask me a question, and this is a question that I've been asked recently. So people say to me, "Oh, Nii, you know all of this history, you know this, you know that, you know this, you know that. So what?" And that is the most valid question. What does that all of that? What would all of that inform you to do? Okay. Here's what it informs you to do. So I talk about wellness, and one of the things that I do in Indigenous intelligence is I offer earthing retreats, which is walking barefoot. Okay.
hmm
Now, that practice has been substantiated by science to say it helps inflammation, stress, and quite a few other ailments. That practice is from our ancestors who used to walk the earth barefoot. They understood that the bottom of their feet had nerve ends, and the ground that we walked on was an electromagnetic field. So they'd be able to align with that energy that essentially was able to heal them in some way. So grounding is one. But the question about what do I do with that information now? I I reach out to corporate organizations and to schools and say I offer earthing retreats. That's a wellness thing. Okay. There are other things that apart from earthing, there's cooking in like earthenware pots that I encourage. So what do you do with that information now? Health. It'll inform your health. Okay. There's no panacea. I don't think there's any one size fit. I'm not saying go and stand on the earth and you're going to heal yourself totally. There's obviously a lot of parts of parcels that going into being a healthy person, but I'm saying that returning to some of these traditions like walking barefoot, not cooking in Teflon pans. If you go into your kitchen, you have all this non-stick dry stuff that your eggs are not sticking in your pan. A lot of them are Teflon, and we should use other cooking materials. For example, things like the way our toilets are built. Because our knees don't have enough elevation, we end up putting a lot of pressure on. So they talk about ancient societies and how they squat and all these pelvic exercises. So that's the wellness side. But then there's obviously the sustainability side. The world is overpopulated, overpolluted. Having this information about how these ancestors sustain themselves, the relationship with earth, with the animals, that informs us of how we live today, the way we live with animals and the way we live with the earth. It's not correct.
Yeah.
It's not correct. But what can you do with that today as well? Empower yourself. You talked about building a clan, aligning with people of like minds, because the more you inform people, the more you build allies and partnerships, the more the story is being told. And when that collective story is finally told, we will realize that our work is to collectively work together to be able to create a sustainable earth for all of us. So that's where this whole indigenous intelligence sits. I talk about we are not races. Okay, we've created that. Scientifically, we come from a mitochondrial DNA. Okay, when we deal with the facts, these are what the facts say. Those facts should inform how we live today. We shouldn't get muddled up in the race conversation. So I formed Indigenous Intelligence to do that. I realized that a lot of organizations, a lot of people, when you talk about Black history, it's relegated to 1 month and it's limited to colonialism, slavery, and stuff. I said, Indigenous intelligence, I'm going to go further back and I'm going to celebrate what our ancestors did, apart from walking barefoot, their contributions to geometry when the step pyramids were built, contributions to arithmetic. These ancestors already knew what the Sirius star was, created a calendar that we still use today. Okay, now we use a Gregorian calendar. That was just like 5 days that was added. But a lot of the technologies from that time are still relevant. We still cannot recreate the building of the pyramid. So our collective history and our brilliance is buried there. Collectively, a lot of brilliance is buried there that we can use to inform how we live now. So indigenous intelligence does that. I celebrate the contributions of our collective ancestors prior to religion, colonialism, and capitalism. So that's what drove me.
When did that business start exactly? When was it inception?
That started
Or no, officially, I would say.
officially that started in August when I left my job
This year.
this year. When I left, so
Amazing.
while I was working at Brightmind, I was heavily involved in a lot of ERGs, employee resource groups, stuff around anti-racism. You know what I'm saying? So I did a lot of, I'm sharing my knowledge. So I did build myself a little network of people I worked with. So when I came home, I said to myself, you know what? I'm familiar with my old business. So I basically sent out an email and I said, listen, I, so before I left, I was helping one of the teams to plan for Black History Month. Okay, so I helped them identify a couple of speakers. So now I find myself at home, not working, and I'm a speaker. So I emailed them and I'm like, listen, guys, we were working on bringing in speakers. I want to come speak. And they'd already seen me speak because I'd spoken a number of times. So when I emailed them, they're like, yeah, Nii, what are you gonna speak about? And I said, listen, you know what Black History Month is like. Every time we do Black History Month, it's just this one celebration, this, that. So let's do this. So I sent them a proposal. My old business became my first client.
Wow. Nice.
And when I was leaving, I was very, very conscious because I worked in sales. I wasn't really having a great relationship with the salespeople, but I was very conscientious and I said to myself, listen, Nii, put your feelings aside because you never know when you're going to need somebody. I walked away. Well, when I left Brightmind, they became LexisNexis became my first client. I reached out to them and I said, listen, I'm working on this Indigenous Intelligence program. So I did a presentation for them in October. That was the first presentation that I'd done for Indigenous Intelligence. And again, there's a story that's told. I went to, I've been working in DEI. This DEI thing started a while. When I moved back to UK, I said to myself, listen, I think I want to work in DEI. So I got introduced to a guy named Jeffrey Williams. He's the head of Burberry's um, DEI. He
It's
invited,
interesting. My wife used to work for Burberry. She worked there for 4 years.
she might know Jeffrey. She
Right.
might she might she might know Jeffrey. So
Right.
Jeffrey invites me along. He tells me, okay, this is what DEI is about. Here's an event. He connects me with um, a guy named Gamal Tawara, and then I meet Joe. But I start meeting all of these people and going to all of these events and starting to understand what it's about. You know what I'm saying? And already I'm on this stuff because I've been reading about this stuff for years. So when I go into my job, I start to get involved in the DEI pieces. I'm talking to the CEO of the company about, listen, this is a problem. Constantly talking about lack of representation for Black and Brown people in the business. So how do you don't just talk, you get involved, you try to make a difference. So I joined these ERGs. But essentially, I was unconscious that I was laying the groundwork for somewhere that I could come back to. So my first check came from the company that I left in July because I was conscious and I said, you know what, I might not be happy about why I'm leaving, but I'm going to be professional. I didn't know at the time that I was going to go back to them and ask them for this, but in the end, I did, and you know what I mean. They turned out to be my first client. So that's basically how this is born. And then I talk to friends and family, and they're like, "Oh, listen, talk to my head of HR." I start getting and reaching out to heads of HR. Then now Black History Month is coming up in the US. I've had friends in the US and like, oh, Nii, are you trying to replicate the program for the US market? So it's morphed into this thing where now, even though Black History Month is done in the UK, I'm still reaching out to companies to say, listen, I'm different. If you are not a tick box organization, talk to me because I can do this quarterly. This is not Black history. I don't. Let's not even use Black history. This is our history. This is going to inform how you can build sustainable programs, not just within your organization, but within the wider world. We all have this responsibility. So that's this idea that I spend so much time. I'm working on a podcast called Indigenous Intelligence that's coming out in January. I'm having some of my work peer reviewed by universities in the US because I've been advised. I have friends that are anthropologists and they're like, "Nee, you know what, you should try and get this peer reviewed." You know what I'm saying? Talk to these people. So I'm in conversations with some universities to get my work peer reviewed. But it's such a large animal. I've been going to my kids' schools. I've been approaching schools saying, listen, this it's a STEM aligned program. I can tie in the arithmetic, the science. I can build all the science from the ancient days and what our ancestors did and tie that into today. So it's morphed into this thing where there's a podcast. There's that now I'm able to bring in my narrative coaching as part of it. So narrative coaching has even morphed into this indigenous intelligence thing. And for me, it's like, oh, Nee, all of these years of reading, you know what I mean? It's coming together. I've never worked this hard, and I definitely don't get paid as much as the work that I do. I'm up at 4 a.m. every day.
Not yet.
Not no, yeah, let me caveat. Let me caveat. But I'm up at almost 4 a.m. every day, and this is. Let me just pull this up. So I don't know if you're gonna see this, but this is
Notebooks.
yeah. This is how much I've journaled this year. There hasn't been any day. Actually, let me be fully honest with you, Case. There's been 3 days in the whole year that I've woken up and not come to this desk to write. If I can't sleep in the middle of the night, I won't go to my phone. I will sit here and write. I never touch my phone when I wake up in the morning. I pick up a piece
Nice.
of paper and a pen. When I go for walks in the park, I got a piece of paper and a pen. There's one thing that
Nice.
I've done this year that's helped me to even come up with this idea is my commitment to sit here and to write down my thoughts. And these things inform your storytelling because when you're writing stuff down, you're to me, writing is where my thoughts either come alive or die. If I want to kill a thought, I'll write it down. If I get into an argument with you, Case, and I want to tell you your case, you know what I mean? If I catch you, don't go, I'll write it down. When I write it down, I don't know. If the next time I see you, I won't even feel like having to say that to you because I feel like I've gotten those words out. So I find that to be therapeutic. And then the things that I want to manifest, the things that I'm doing, is a constant paper trail. I wrote about this yesterday. I'm still writing about it. So I'm so committed.
Reinforcement.
Yeah, I'm so committed to journaling. I don't think alcohol is bad, but at the beginning of the year, I stopped drinking. I wake up between 4 and 5 every day, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, and I journal. And straight from journaling, I work. I've never put so much work into a project. I've worked for different
Is
organizations.
is 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 when you say you haven't worked so hard, is part of that work on you?
It's so I mean, case what I do is it's a constant reflection and there's a constant check on me. You know what I mean? When you're going out to tell people that you do this, how do you how do they buy into you? You know what I mean? Do you live
Right,
by these
right,
ideas? Do you actually
right,
walk barefoot? Do you actually
right.
cook from these things? Do you actually it's a constant test. So journaling is one. You know what I mean? It's like you got to do it. You know what I'm saying? You got to discipline yourself to do something. To get something. You have to take something away. You have to deprive yourself of something. And this is one of the things that I did. I thought to myself that, and is it hard? Um, and that's the thing. Hard is a mindset. It was hard when
Mm-hmm.
I started the first day. It's not hard when you're 200 and odd days into it. I'm always writing. So yes, the work is hard, but when it means so much to you, it's not hard.
It's bigger than you, and that's why I said to you earlier. When for me, working with people is finding something that's bigger than them, because there are going to be days I tell people all the time where you don't feel like it. That I've met people who, when working with them, I've said to them, "You need to speak about this." I was told the same thing. I wasn't on camera. I wasn't doing videos maybe 5, 6 years ago because imposter syndrome, because this, because of that, and I had a coach tell me something that then I've put into my work. He said to me, with what you do, we've got your purpose, we know how you help people, we know how it helps your family, we know how it helps the wider community. So this now means that you have a moral obligation to do what you do. So when now working with people, I'm saying to them, if if you get this, you'll be on video tomorrow. Being on video isn't about you, it's about the person you're trying to help
Yeah,
and getting that information to them.
yeah,
And once you understand they need it, they're waiting for it, it's going to help them, then you'll see that how your hair is. I've had a guy who I worked with, a really nice guy, who wanted him to do a video, and he hadn't done this video, and he kept putting it off. And then one day, I said to him, "Dude, you gonna do this video or not?" He said to me, "Yeah, I'm doing it today. I just need to go and get my hair cut and get a shave first." And he did it. But I was saying to him, "Dude, no one cares about your hair or your beard. It's what you're saying. Trust me, when it hits them, they're not even going to remember what your hair was like, but they're going to remember how they felt when that hit them." And when I'm hearing you talk about reinforcing through journaling and the size of what you're dealing with, as I said to a guy that I met the other day, this Nigerian boy, Prince, when you're building a business and it's bigger than you, the magic, the curse, the difficulty is that there is nothing to follow.
yeah.
Once you're doing this thing that we do, you can watch everybody else and you can grab things. It's the reason why I do this podcast, right? Because I do my best afterwards to summarize it and see, maybe illuminate for people what the lessons were. It's not just somebody talking about themselves. There are a lot of lessons and inspirations in what's been said. But I think the main thing that I want people to understand is this is such a magical thing where you take it upon yourself to build something that in your DNA, in your marrow, is going to impact people. But at the same time, you actually don't know how the hell it's going to work.
You know what? It's funny. I'm gonna share something with you, and it just speaks to what you said. I say to a lot of people, and then sometimes I say to myself, "Case, I'm not even messing with you. This is like straight up and down." Sometimes I say to myself, "Nee, you don't know what you're doing." I don't discount Case. I don't discount that this is all wrong. it's the wrong thing. It could be. I don't discount that. You know what I mean? Yes, I have this inherent belief that what I'm doing is right, but like you said, what who said? I mean, it's like there's no guarantees, there's no template. So I'm mindful of that. But the value is here. The value is, regardless what's happened, this is a platform to the next chapter. If this isn't
Yeah,
that chapter that I've been kind of working towards, then this is going to be the chapter for the next chapter. The
for
value that
sure.
I'm, the things that I'm going to learn now. Now I build relationships with people like yourself. If it's the next endeavor, then it's the next endeavor. But the lessons will inform my life as every other lesson that has led up to this point would be. So I don't know what I'm doing, and I'm happy to admit that I don't know what I'm doing. But when I look at the world and I pick a problem, I guess in my mind, that's what is that macro problem. How do we all survive? You know what I mean? What can we do to what practical things can we do to do that? And this is my way of doing it. You know what I mean? So I don't know what I'm doing, but I think what I'm doing is maybe right. But you know what I mean? I reach out to companies all the time, and they're like, "Ah, need not for us. Ah, need what for? Not that's not something that we want to do."
But it doesn't stop you,
Uh,
right? It doesn't stop you.
it's actually what motivates me because I
Right,
used to work for a guy who used to say, "Nee, it always takes 99 fuck yous to get one yes. You gotta
right,
be ready to just keep on getting rejected, rejected,
right.
rejected, rejected, rejected." So, you know what I mean? When I get rejected by people who say, "Oh, it's not a good program, an email doesn't come back," I literally think to myself that this is not my person. You know what I mean? I'm going to find somebody who's going to understand the value of what I'm doing. And like
It's
you
not your
said,
person.
you said this to me, Case, how you do this session with people to determine if you're going to work for them. So I put out this indigenous intelligence thing. Anyone that reads it, who reaches out to me or emails me, I'm already going to know that they're interested. You know what I mean? The day the phone rings or the email that comes through, I know that we're going to resonate on that wavelength. I'm not really going to receive messages or correspondence from people who don't want to do what I'm doing. So the rejection is fine. I can deal with that. I can deal with it's tough, but I've been in sales for so long. You know what I mean? In sales, your favorite word is no, is rejection. You know what I'm saying?
Your favorite word is no. That's amazing.
Well, it has to be because you know what I'm saying. Majority of the clients that you're going to try and sell to are going to tell you no. You know what I mean?
And it gets you to know that it's not them. So move along. Let's go. Who's
Exactly.
next?
You know what I mean? And you know what? I don't even remember the names of the people that told me no. You know what I mean? It doesn't stick. It's just part of what you do. You get rejected, and that is the same thing in life. And it's a business. It's a business thing, or it's a something that as people we can learn from this rejection. I was having some thoughts yesterday, and I think I came up with this. Well, it probably didn't come up because I've read things, but I said let and I put a post on LinkedIn. I said, let people go like you let thoughts go. You know what I mean?
Right.
If somebody doesn't want to
Yeah.
listen to me, I'm not gonna force my message. You know what I'm
No.
saying? It's fine. You know what I mean? This is not. I'm not. It's let people go. Let thoughts go. I have a message. I think it's going to positively impact businesses, schools, and individuals. If you believe in my message, um, let's talk. Apart from the fact that I try and substantiate what I say through science, I'm also trying to get my stuff, you know what I'm saying, peer reviewed, just so people can actually take me seriously. Because it's like, people ask me as a narrative coach. It's a really good friend of mine. I think kind of, she was like, "Oh, did you do the Animas coaching accreditation? Did you do this?" She was so disappointed that I was even coaching people without having the certification. So she's kind of gone, you know what I'm saying, gone a little quiet with me and stopped like checking out my posts. And I've just been like, you know what, that's fine. But um, I got a message that I think can help corporates, can help schools, can help individuals, and it's how you tell your story. What is the bedrock, what is the framework of your story? I will help you work on the framework. Once you fix that framework, it will inform your values and your actions today.
Absolutely beautiful. Nii, I knew it was going to be amazing as soon as we came on today. I just knew it, man. And obviously we've been connected in a way. We're definitely going to speak, and we're going to meet up physically. Going to sit down, have a drink, you know, talk things through, and see exactly what we can do. But you've been absolutely amazing. I know it's been amazing because I've got a list of questions, and every time I've gone to actually ask you a question, our conversation has just led to you answering it. And my brain's like, oh, he's answering that question you're about to ask. Okay, what next? So there's a whole bunch of other questions I could ask you, but I want to leave it there. But before we go, I've got two questions for you, maybe three. The first question is, could you explain who your ideal client is? Who, not who do you wish to work with, just to help you with the answer, who would get the most benefit and value from working with you? You've talked a lot. I was very happy to hear you talk about, because in your now in the bio, I'm talking about who helps individuals uncover their true selves through storytelling. But again, like I've said, a lot of the time when I'm dealing with people, what is presented, back to your whole idea of narrative and storytelling, is such a small part of what they actually are or what they're doing.
Mm,
And you kept on talking about corporates, which was very important because a corporate entity is full of many individuals
yes,
and it affects many individuals.
absolutely.
So, who is your ideal client to work with from a corporate point of view?
From a corporate point of view, any organization that would even suggest that they have an element of diversity, that would be my target customer. Because when I think one of the hardest conversations in diversity to have right now is around race. Okay, no matter where you go, most people find it very difficult to have those race conversations. So, what's the story and the bedrock and the framework that informs these race conversations? It's been the same story and the bedrock. I will reframe that framework and tell a different story because that story that breaks us down into race is divisive and is permeated into the workplace.
For sure.
It needs to be reframed. So, my ideal target customer are large corporates who deal with diversity, obviously have diverse races, and then schools. I have a son. I'm passing on information. I think children who are informed at an early age and can start telling their stories earlier than people like us, you and I, started, understanding and having a different framework. I start at the STEM schools that are aligned with STEM schools. I've been trying to reach out to my daughter's school, my son's school, but I want to reach children. I want to reach children because I think the next generation kids are going to run this world one day. So those are my two target clients: the corporate sector and the and schools.
Education.
Education.
Absolutely perfect. Okay, if people want to find out more about you, get in contact with you, what should they do? Where should they go?
Hit me up on LinkedIn. Hit me up on LinkedIn. There's a website that's coming. I'm still working with a developer to bring the website. I'll share that with you once that's up. There's a podcast.
Perfect.
There's a podcast that's coming. I have a few. I have a goal of 7 podcasts before I release it. I think I'm at 5. So the goal is to release the podcast at the beginning of the year. And on the podcast, one of the people I've interviewed is a professor from Davidson University who happens to be a really close friend of mine. She's an anthropologist, and we have some of these conversations. I've spoken to her, and then I basically speak to. I don't limit the conversations to academics, but to anybody who can understand indigenous thinking. That's why it's called indigenous intelligence. So anyone who aligns with that thinking, because when you talk indigenous, then you're talking a totally different story. So best ways to contact me: hit me up on LinkedIn. I got the website coming, and the podcast is coming as well in January.
Perfect. Okay, so bonus question time. And what that means is I am going to ask you to give me a number between 1 and 18, and then I'm going to ask you that question.
9.
9. I'm gonna go with that one. Okay, if your business was a movie, what movie would it be? Your business, your career, and who would play you?
My business was a movie. What movie was wow? Who would play me? Whoa. Whew, wow. If my business was a movie, and who would play me? Wow. I think of a movie, but I can't think of who would play me. If
Give me the movie. Give me the movie.
well, it's fine. The movie is called Imitation of Life, and it's like an old movie
Okay.
from like the 60s or the 50s. And if I remember the story correctly, the movie is about this. Um, I think it's about this. Either it's a white lady who has a mixed race child, and this mixed race child just has a hell of a time because she has this black, and I think she either kills herself, or it's a black lady who has a mixed race child. But that I always kind of remember that story as to think to myself, here is a mixed race person whose mother or is black or white, and they're being persecuted by that that race. So that's one. I like the movie. Okay, so you know what? I'm gonna choose this movie. I wish I could choose another one, but I'm gonna choose this one. It's called. Is it? It's not Avatar. It's a movie produced by Mel Gibson where
Mm-hmm.
it's set in the ancient apocalyptic
Yeah, that's an
apocalyptic.
amazing.
You know,
That's an
I want
amazing
to be
movie.
the dude that saves his family. When the invaders come, he puts them into a well, and then he goes along on this journey with them. You know what I'm saying? And there's a point where he's in the forest with his dad, and they see this group of people who are running away from. You know what I'm saying? So the son sees him, who I'm thinking is me, and he's like, Dad, don't you see the fear in the eyes? And his dad says, Listen, fear will destroy you. It will eat you up. Don't think about fear. But I like the indigenous knowledge that came
Mm-hmm.
from the
Mm-hmm.
movie. You know what I mean? So
Mm-hmm.
apocalyptic,
Mm-hmm.
apocalyptic.
Oh, that's an amazing. Oh, that's amazing. Okay, cool. So I'm gonna put your LinkedIn in the notes. Nee, it's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you. Really, that's like I told you at the top, 9:30 in the morning. What did my calendar do to me? What did I do to myself? But this has been absolutely amazing. You said something about star. You didn't say this, but no matter what's happening in my life personally for me, and it can be really shitty sometimes, right? Just shit happening. But then something happens in your life where you just realize, like you said, there's good, there's bad, it's all part of the same experience.
Yeah.
But there's things that happen where everything that's gone before, where you're just like, what? Huh? Something happens and it all just makes sense. Maybe it can last for a long time. It just makes sense. It was just a fleeting moment where it's just like it just makes sense and it lets you carry on.
It carries
This
you.
conversation, this conversation with you today is one of those moments
Thank you.
where no matter how I'm going to do a podcast. Yeah, I already had one. I'm going to change it. I'm going to do new branding. I'm going to find new guests. It's going to be like this. Back to your point, Case, what are you really doing?
We don't
What
know.
is
We
this?
don't know. We don't,
What
we
is
don't
this?
know. We don't know. You know what? It's funny because you said something to me about your parents, and I thought it was there's something that aligns with my story, with one of the stories I tell myself. So you said you were Yoruba. One of the most one of the people I'm most in awe of is a Yoruba man called Fela Kuti.
Mhm,
And I used to live in New York City in the 90s. And when I lived in New York City, I mean, I lived in Jamaica, Queens on Hillside Avenue. I mean, I moved to New York in the 90s, you know what I'm saying? I was spending time in like the places people rap about, Queensbridge Projects, Left Rack City. I was walking around. I was at every single hip hop concert you could find. I was literally in the hood in the 90s. I went to a club in New York called The Apartment. I think it was 99 or 2000. And I remember it correctly because I think it was on West 14th Street in the Meat District, right? So I'm at this club. This will blow your mind. So I'm at this club. This is in the 2000s. So I'm at this club, jamming. I'm a hip hop head back then. So I'm jamming, jamming, jamming. And all of a sudden, I hear Fela Kuti playing. The DJ starts playing Fela. And I know Fela Kuti because my dad used to listen to Fela. You know what I mean? But I'm in New York City rocking my Timbs and I hear Fela Kuti. So I'm like, I walk right up to the DJ set and I'm like, yo, bro, what you know about Fela Kuti, yo? It's funny, I still know the DJ today. His name's Rich Medina. And he's like, Rich, he's not the night. DJs don't like you to come up to the booth. So he's like, fuck out of here, man. What you doing? What you know about Fela Kuti? I'm like, yo, you playing? He's like, yo, get out of here. And I'm like, yo, but Fela is like, so he's like, listen, let me put you on to this movement. It was called Jump and Funk. I share that with you because that moment was very significant for me because till that time in the 90s when I lived in New York City, I wanted to be everything that represented African American culture. Rich Medina changed that. That was the first I heard Fela Kuti playing, and I felt like, wow, I'm proud to be this African. Everybody in the crowd was going crazy, crazy. After that, for about 3 years, nearly every event that I went to in New York City was Fela Kuti inspired because he had this movement called Jump and Funk. And I think it was 2 or 3 times a year, there'd be this huge part. My friends used to say, dude, aren't you going to come to a hip hop club? And I'm like, nah. But that moment made me feel proud to be African out of Africa. Fela Kuti did
Yeah,
the Yoruba man.
yeah, that's beautiful.
So big up,
That's a
big up,
beautiful
big
way
up,
to end.
big up the Yoruba people, man.
That is absolutely beautiful. Nee, thank you so much for being on. Obviously, after we've done, we're going to keep in contact,
Yeah,
okay?
we are.
Thank you so much.
We are.
Thank you so much for watching this episode of the Startup Lowdown. I hope you got a massive amount of insights, motivation, inspiration, just had your mind kind of massaged into what's possible. Thank you so much for joining us, and I will see you on the next episode. Bye bye. Thanks for tuning in to the Startup Lowdown. I hope today's conversation brought you fresh insights and a new perspective on the realities of building a business. Remember, success isn't just about profit, it's about growth, both personal and professional. If you enjoyed today's episode, consider subscribing, leaving a review, a comment, and make sure you share it with everybody who might benefit from these candid stories.